All right, joining us now, she has been a regular on this show since 2017 when she made her first appearance on In the Circle. We spoke a lot about her playing career and kind of broadcasting, and well, she's still doing broadcasting very well. She's getting ready to call a super regional with Mike Cousens, Stanford versus LSU, fresh off calling a regional there. I speak of former two-time All-American Arizona, Kenzie Fowler, joining us here on In the Circle on D1 Softball. Did you realize you've been on this show every year at least once since 2017, and have actually, among other than Justin McLeod, you have been the most frequent guest in the history of the show?
No, but thank you for the honor. Happy to
Yes.
be here.
Yes, that's why I was bugging you all this time to keep our streak alive. But you're super busy, which is a good problem to have. And I want to start with that. You've had a fascinating year, and especially the last few weeks. You got to be a part of the Pac-12 tournament coverage. Then you got to be part of the regionals with Mike Cousins, which was a dramatic regional. I think a lot of people were shocked. It went to a game 7 with Cal State Fullerton pushing Stanford, which we'll get to. And here you are calling now a super regional, one of arguably the marquee matchup of the supers, Stanford versus LSU. I just want to start by take us through that period from the Pac-12 tournament to a regional to now a super. How do you prepare for three completely different weekends, if you will, and what goes into that?
Well, you can now send my mail to the booth at Stanford because I live there now. I
Yes.
have been there. This will be my third straight week, and honestly, I am so here for it. The matchups have been everything. So, I never care where I'm going to be sent in postseason. The big part of it is that I'm a part of it. So grateful to be covering, our sport at this stage, another season. And just so happens I'm staying on the West Coast for another weekend. But the regionals weekend is a beast for talent, play-by-plays, producers, the camera crew. Like, it's a beast. It's a long night. We didn't have any weather delays. Luckily, we had picture perfect, like quintessential Northern California weather. And you're still exhausted. So I can't imagine for the sites that did have weather delays, because on top of the 7 games that you're calling, man, it's exhausting, but it's the best kind of exhausting. You have like this crazy softball hangover after the weekend, and it's just such a fun thing to be a part of. And like, where else would I rather be? I'd rather be in that booth calling those games, in May every single time. So this weekend a little bit easier. Instead of 4 teams you're prepping for, and then the same thing in the conference tournament, prepping for 4 teams. That's tough. It's really tough. It's tougher when you don't know the assignments and you have 3 days to, do all the scouting and do your best to talk to the teams, get the storylines. So super is a little bit easier in that way, where you only have 2 teams and you've kind of been watching their stories develop, and you know who they're going to be. So yeah, Stanford, LSU, let's go.
Let's go indeed. So you mean you didn't have to stay up till 3 in the morning to cover a game like I had to do in Tallahassee? Is that what
No.
you're reference your weather there, Impact?
No, and usually I have the honor of having the latest game Saturday
Yeah.
because I'm usually on a West Coast, just as that's where I live. So that has been my tradition, being the last game standing on Elimination Saturday. Did not get that honor this weekend. That went to Carol and Mark, of course, who were,
Yeah.
and you were there too as
I
well.
was
So
there. I was right
yeah,
behind
you were
home
there too.
plate. Me and Mark Neely.
Um,
I was giving Mark a pep talk after the game. Yeah, it told
Oh
you it'd be fun.
man, so tough. We did have the last game and the last team to punch in, so I guess in a different way, have the last team to punch its ticket to Supers and Stanford going, the if necessary on Sunday.
Well, that's a good segue. I think you've done this media stuff before. Um, Stanford pushed to a game 7. Cal State Fullerton beat them a game 6. It was an interesting regional in that Stanford, it wasn't anything was easy. Even the first game against St. Mary's, they jump out to a big lead. They take out Najee Kennedy. St. Mary's makes a run to make it 7-6. They have to bring Kennedy back. Just kind of describe this regional for Stanford, because they won the regional, but it's been kind of up and down for them here as they head to the Supers.
Yeah, and you hate to make it bigger than it is, but it's the storyline. So, the storyline is what the storyline is, and that is Stanford is 2 different teams when Nyjah is in the circle and when Nyjah is not in the circle. Wasn't really a problem for them last year. They had Elena Vaughter. She, an All-American pitcher. Of course, Nyjah wasn't an All-American because she didn't meet the innings, quota, but we all know first team All-American this year, was last year, but, just didn't have the same workload. So you're looking at two All-Americans on staff and two aces, kind of similar to what we're seeing with like Tennessee, right? So you can just feel very comfortable about which arm is going out there. And, you saw it this weekend when Nyjah wasn't in the circle, they gave up 14 runs. So Cal State Fullerton, St. Mary's, and I talked about this briefly. It's so tough to be the number 2 pitcher to the best pitcher in the sport. You're going to, head out to the circle and the team is going to be excited to hit against you and revved up and ready to go because they know that we have to score right now before that other arm comes in. And you saw the urgency with St. Mary's and you saw the urgency with Cal State Fullerton when Reagan Krause was in the circle. And that is a tough place to be. I don't envy that position. But it's the storyline when Nyjah's not in the circle. How does Stanford hold down the other team's offense?
Well, and they got to get better at bats. It seems their offense was, even the game 7 against Fullerton, they had the 1 inning after she fell behind 2-0. They got the full run, but that was it. And Kennedy, just dominated Fullerton. But still, it's going to be interesting how Jessica Allister manages this because there's this big discussion in the sport, Kenzie, and you know this. One pitcher can't pitch every game anymore in the postseason. It's got to be by staff, not like the days when you pitched. But yet you kind of feel like if you're Stanford, you may have to throw her every game to advance. What's your thoughts on this kind of competing thing? Because I get messages every time about why didn't so-and-so pitch this game or why not? And it's this kind of philosophy now of you got to have more than one pitcher to go deep in postseason. Where are you staying on all that?
Yeah, I agree. There's just too much scouting. And even as good as she is, Nyjah is, she's a generational talent. By far, I think the best pitcher of, this generation. She's going to be so heavily scouted and she's still dominant. So to me, that tells me she can do it. If anyone can do it, it's her. But it's just tough, right? It's tough. That's a long road. We just haven't seen that in our sport recently. We've seen, even Oklahoma with the big pitchers that they've had in the circle. It's always you have an ace 1 and then a good solid, 100 innings plus pitcher behind her. So it'll be interesting to see if Stanford can do that, but you're going to have to. It's her. She's got to take their team the rest of the way.
Well, and the challenge, obviously, with LSU, they've got Berzon, who's a stud herself, and Kelly Lynch, former Husky, went to LSU. She could be a big factor in this super regional matchup, which I think a lot of people are looking forward to seeing. So pitching will be dominant. I want to ask you about Nyjah some more here, because I saw during the broadcast, they actually compared her to your numbers, to her numbers, which was great, because I think some people have forgotten how great you were at Arizona. You've got a front row seat covering her. What makes her so special? She's probably going to win National Player of the Year. You mentioned that you think she's the best pitcher in this generation. Why is she so different than every other pitcher right now in the sport?
Well, I just would like to say that I had more strikeouts and more innings just because I pitched more. The comparison was to drive home the fact of how much I threw in my first 2 years versus she's throwing a lot, but it's just a different era where you're not throwing 3 games in a weekend. So that was the main point of the graphic, was to show.
I thought the main point was just to show you as a player, the graphic, your young photo there, man.
Okay, that's yeah. But I just would like to also point out that her ERA is not normal. It is not normal. That is her ERA is an ERA from the early 90s, the 80s with the white softball at 40 feet. Like it's just crazy what we're able to see from her. I said this on the broadcast and I'll say it again, but she has the movement of Kat Osterman with her rise and the speed and the velocity of Monica Abbott. So, those are couple of good names if you've heard of them before, but that's how hard it is to go up against her. You have no time to make up your mind. Do I lay off of the rise or do I swing at the rise? Am I looking change? She's throwing that changeup more this season. Last year when she threw it, it was a big deal. Like, oh, she has a changeup. Now it's yes, she has a changeup, and she's going to throw it once or twice every batter. And so now that's just messing with everyone. She had a couple of pitches this weekend against like the left-handed hitters. When she goes rise at it's 72 miles an hour and it starts at the belt and it breaks up, it's on the inside part of the plate and it goes under their hands. You cannot do it any better than that. That you have to be so perfect to execute that pitch. The velocity, the movement, the location, it's as good as it gets.
It's yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned it on the broadcast. You think she's the face of the sport here moving forward? That she could be, to me,
Could
is
be.
right. Like, I mean,
I
could
think I think she I think if she gets a couple more postseason runs and you get you just have to have the stage, right? You have to be on the field, you have to have the eyeballs watching you, but it's just we're waiting for that, right? So she has the goods are coming. We just need to see her on our screens more.
well, she seems to be a great teammate. Like the post games, they dress her up, right? Like if
Oh
she's doing
yeah.
the post game interview, not a lot of players, but that's a great bonding situation there. She seems to get that, and
She's
without that
incredibly
person,
humble.
yeah.
Yeah, incredibly humble. So, you always love to root for that.
Is she the best player you've covered? Where do you rank her? You've now done this for a decade. With obviously you covered a lot of Pac-12, but you've started obviously cover more national games here over the last couple of years. Where do you rank her in your pecking order of players you've covered it from a media standpoint?
She's right up there with Rachel Garcia. When Rachel Garcia was peak Rachel Garcia, and sometimes she was even a better hitter than pitcher, and she could just take control of the whole game. I mean, that was electric. Um, Nyjah has a couple of bats. I saw her take some BP. She has a ton of power. But it just is one of those things where, you know, if anything were to happen, okay, we got to make sure we have the focus be the focus and the big thing be the big thing, and that's you in the circle. But Rachel Garcia was electric, and I think Nyjah more dominant pitcher, but as a complete player, I'll still give that to Rachel.
That's pretty good company,
Yep.
for sure. Here we're speaking with Kenzie Fowler here on In the Circle and D1 Softball. You've pitched at this level. You've won a Super Regional. You've pitched at the World Series. I'm curious. Compare your nerves before a Super Regional game that you're going to pitch or a World Series game you're going to pitch versus minutes before you go on the air as an analyst for a Super Regional or a Regional.
Ooh, probably calling. Probably get more nervous calling, I think. Mike Cousens asked me this weekend what was more nerve-wracking, playing or calling, and I said watching. Being a fan at home is the most nerve-wracking of the three, because when you're calling the game, we're so focused. Like we're talking to each other, and you want to make sure you get your elements in, and you're talking to your producer. There's just a lot of moving
Yeah.
parts. Of course, you're locked into the game and you're feeling the momentum, but you are also working. When you're playing, I didn't really feel the nerves. It's just like what you prepare for. If you're feeling nerves, hopefully that's a good thing. And it's those good butterflies and you're just excited. If you're stressed and you're saying, I don't know if I can do this, well, then you might as well not even step on that field. You have to embrace the mayhem and embrace the craziness that comes with it, and just be so excited that you get to be on the stage as a player. So I didn't really get nervous. Oklahoma City, okay, I won't lie. I was nervous my first game, Oklahoma City, as a freshman. I remember that feeling. My stomach was like sunk down all the way. But I will say the most nerve-wracking thing is sitting at home watching these games, especially like this last weekend. You have the quad box, or even there was one time where 5 screens are up and everyone's being eliminated, and you're having walk-offs here, and pushing a if necessary game there. So that to me is because you can't do anything about it. You're just taking it in, and the ratings, I hope, are really good because we had some electric finishes this weekend all across the country.
No doubt. Of course, you're covering Stanford, LSU. Meanwhile, Arizona and UCLA both get to the Supers. UCLA, a lot of redemption there, beating Grand Canyon in the regional final. Some payback from last year. They beat Virginia Tech in the wild winners bracket game to get there. And then Arizona going, I guess Fayetteville's become like a second home to Caitlin Lowe and company, because they win the Fayetteville Regional, beating Arkansas, beating Villanova in the regional final. What's your thoughts on UCLA and Arizona getting this far? Because both had adversity this year with injuries and questions in the circle. And here they are. UCLA will host Georgia in the Supers. Arizona will be going to Stillwater against Oklahoma State, which a year from now, that'll be a Big 12 conference
I
game.
know, a little preview. That's crazy.
But give me your thoughts on those two as somebody you've covered it from afar, because you've seen them, some adversity, but it seems like UCLA in particular, after they swept Stanford, turned their season around. But your thoughts on those two?
Both very similar in terms of they're going to go as their offense goes. That's the strength of both teams. And so you saw both of them, and they're streaky. UCLA is streaky, right? All of a sudden they can put up 10 runs on you in one game or in one inning, and the game is over like that before you know it. So, and same kind of thing for Arizona, swinging the bat at the right time. Both have thinner pitching staffs than what we're used to, and I think have I guess surprised with how well they've done. The expectations weren't super high for either team in terms of just the pitching staffs. Arizona missing Devin Netz, their ace from a season ago, and then UCLA graduating their aces with Megan Framo and Brooke Yanez. So just the unknowns there. So sitting with the hitters, delivering, and that's hard to do in postseason. Sometimes you've got to have good pitching, good defense, timely hitting. Well, for UCLA and Arizona, they were just like, well, we're just going to out hit you, and we're going to score one more run than you. And kind of interesting that both of those teams didn't face what I think we all would have thought would have been the matchup on Sunday. Probably thought we would see Arkansas, Arizona on Sunday, and thought we'd see Virginia Tech, UCLA on Sunday. Not the case. Just goes to show anything can happen. It's May. The parity is real. And shout out to the mid-majors. They showed up.
The mid-majors showed up. Grand Canyon, Omaha was a win away from a super regional, so I think there was good parity there that showed among the 3 and the 4 seeds there. And it should be fascinating. Baylor gets through to the Supers, beating Louisiana there. In fact, Baylor and Arizona, the two teams not hosts that advanced to the Super Regionals there for those two programs. Those, again, Baylor, Arizona, going to be Big 12 next year. I'm just getting you warmed up for next year, Kenzie. Getting you warmed up. You've covered, obviously, a lot more national the last couple of years. Certainly with ESPN and all the coverages you've gotten. One of the narratives that used to exist was the SEC versus Pac-12. Obviously, that's not as much anymore because obviously we all know what's going on with what's going to happen with the Pac-12 and everything like that. But you've covered both leagues. What's been your thoughts covering the SEC and the Pac-12 now, having covered it in that last couple of years?
It's a good question. I don't like to compare. The one thing that the SEC, everyone always has to remember is how deep it is. It's 13 teams. Like it's a lot more going on than the Pac-12 with 9. So, there's just a lot more, to cover. There's more storylines. The last year, the Pac-12 with being a part of the Pac-12 tournament was really special. Thought Utah was going to be the only Pac-12 tournament champs. They were right there, so close, but UCLA gets their revenge on the season ago. So finishing the way that they want to, but I don't know. The comparison is, I don't know. I will say this. One thing that Coach Candrea always says about our sport is that our sport was elevated when the SEC invested in softball, and when the SEC decided to build stadiums and say this product is worth it. And so there's so much that our game has elevated from, and it's from the benefit from the SEC investing in their sport and being the leaders and driving, say, hey, like this is a product. We're going to cover it the way it should be covered. We're going to build stadiums the way stadiums should be built. And then, you watch the rest of the country try and catch up, because before Arizona was like the only big stadium. It was the West Coast, like they have outfield bleachers. What? And the rest of the country catches up, and then, it's the cause and effect. It makes everybody else better, and it elevates our sport as a whole.
Well, you're right. And I'm going to give you credit. You were on a couple of years ago when Trisha Ford was hired at Texas A&M. You thought she would be a big success because of the facilities and the support that A&M provided for her. And here we are as we're talking. She's in this already got A&M in year 2 into the Super Regionals. They've hosted a regional, won a regional. Now they're going to play Texas there. So credit to you. That's why we have you on every year. That's predictions like
Well,
that.
also, I will like to go on record, and Gray Robertson can back me up on this, but I had A&M hiring Coach Ford before anybody else. There was like a lot of talk about who was going to be hired, and I was talking to Gray, and I was like, it's going to be Trisha. He was like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's going to be Trisha. And then a week later, he was like, you called it. And I was like, yup.
I think you told me the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Except it was text. So, um, so obviously the Super. Let me ask you a couple more things. Mike Cousens, you mentioned you've been paired up with. I don't think you have worked with him before this year, have you? Prior to this,
Nope. Nope. It was our first weekend.
So what's that like? Here you are. You're coming into a regional. You're working with somebody you have not worked with before. Of course, Mike Cousens had worked with Caleb Bro the last few years. Has done supers. Fantastic broadcaster. Is there like dialogue beforehand to get you there? Do you just wing it? How do you make it work? Because you obviously two sounded great in the regionals, but you never worked together before. So how do you make that work?
It was a little tough because he was calling an NBA game, I think, on Wednesday, and then there were all these crazy storms. And so he was supposed to be out with us on Thursday, but he had like travel day of craziness and, got delayed. So finally got there in time. I told him, as long as you are there Friday at 4:30, I'm good. Because that was our first game, our first pitch time for Friday. So, that was a bummer, but he's going to be on time this this week. I don't think he's calling any NBA games this week, but yeah, he was great. It's always, tough. You never know who you're going to be calling with. And if it's someone that you haven't called with, you have to get to know each other very quickly. And there's not a lot of time for that in regionals. You have 7 games in front of you. You're trying to prepare for these 4 teams and make sure all the storylines are covered. So I feel like we kind of got to know each other along the way. And it is nice when you get that repetition and you get the consistency of calling with the same person the following week. So I'm excited to be back with him in the booth. And I think we're the tallest talent. We're the tallest booth.
Tallest.
Yeah, we're like the Twin Towers. He's like 6'4", I'm 6 foot. So we have the
wow.
Yeah.
Breaking news here. That's an interesting development.
Those are our stats.
I like this. That's good. That's very good. You've worked with a lot of different play-by-play people. Does that help you to adapt? That you're able to adapt because you're used to working with different people? Because obviously, when you get ESPN assignments, you're not going to get the same person every time during the regular season. It's so hectic, etc. Does that help you versus maybe somebody that's been accustomed to working with somebody for a while? Then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, by the way, now you got to flip it.
I totally appreciate working with different people because there's so many things that I can learn and pick up from everyone. I take something from every single person I've ever called a game with. So, and that goes for producers as well. It's a whole team effort. I think people forget how big a part producers have in driving the game and driving the storylines. Because sometimes we get so locked in, we need somebody in our ear like, hey, bring it back, or let's talk about this, show the numbers. So yeah, working with different people is one of the coolest parts of this job, meeting all these people along the way. This is my 10th year calling, which is crazy. If I just think back to my first year out of college, calling games right after I graduated to now, like that's a long journey. I don't know if I want to go back and listen to any of my games from 2015, but it's because of all the people that I've worked with along the way that have helped me. And there was so much advice thrown my way early too. Like that was super helpful. Like, hey, do this a little bit better. You're really good at this. Do that more. Don't do this. Don't talk here. So, all those people that you meet form the person that you are along the way.
We've talked in the past when you've been on about the injuries you had to deal with and cutting your career short as a player. Do you feel, part of you feels like that was meant to be now in retrospect because it got you into broadcasting sooner? Like maybe you don't get into broadcasting if you don't have those injuries. Maybe you're still playing. Do you think it was just the kind of, and I've talked to Scarborough who had a similar situation where she had injuries in her career and that kind of pushed her into broadcasting. Do you feel maybe now that, not that you wish you didn't have the injuries, but
No,
Do
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
you believe that that was destined in a way that, hey, that's we were meant to be, go to broadcast because of that?
Totally could be. My redshirt year, when I had my back surgery, going into my senior season, I couldn't do really anything for a while because I don't recommend back surgery for anybody. That recovery is not fun. So what I did to like keep myself busy was I studied more, which is like so funny to say, but like, when you're a baller from young age, it's like that ball is life mentality. I know student athlete is what we call ourselves, but inside I'm like, I'm here to play softball. I'm here to pitch. And so when I wasn't pitching that year, I was like, what do I do? And I went to work. I had decided my major was going to be broadcast journalism, and I really got into it. It's like instead of staying extra hours in the cage and doing all those extra reps, I stayed extra hours in the classroom and I was doing extra reps, for my journalism work and doing extra reels and helping out with extra projects. So it is very interesting to look back, because had that not been the case, like maybe I wouldn't have found my footing there and realize, oh, I really like to talk. This is something that I like to do. Can I be in front of a camera? Is that, let's try it. Let's go out and, I would go to a school and do the whole stand-up thing and, hey, I'm here reporting live, all that. And you come back to the classroom and you cut it up for the broadcast. And I was doing a lot of that. And I was, it's weird how it all flipped. Instead of success on the field, I turned into this hard worker in the classroom and got to speak at my graduation. They like named me student of the year or whatever. And I was like, award that's not for softball. Didn't know that was a thing for me. But yeah, I think there's so much that goes into that. You just never know what the plans are. And the plans worked out.
Do you remember your first regional you got assigned to?
Hmm. I think it was Arizona,
What year?
2016, I think.
It's pretty good.
Oh gosh, maybe 2017.
It's
I need
pretty
to go
good.
look. I think it was Arizona.
Makes
I really
sense.
did. Yeah.
How
I
do
think
you
it's
think?
Arizona, South Carolina, New Mexico State.
Right, that was the Arizona
St.
over South Carolina.
Francis. Yes, that was my first regional, Arizona.
How do you think you're different today than you were back then when you had that first regional? How have you evolved?
I think just more polished and having an understanding of the bigger picture of the production versus just what's going on in the field. There's so many things that, you want to get in. They don't always get in. So that's something that, you just have to try and do your best on setting each other up. And if you want to get a storyline in, how do you tease it? And then when the moment comes, you're ready for it. Um, but I think just, watching and having an understanding of, how these players are coming up, and being out a couple of years versus being just in it, just in the fire, and kind of thinking of the game as just a pitcher who was just competing on the field. So now you can kind of take yourself back and remove and have the bigger picture of what the journey is for these players and for these coaches too. So, watching them develop along the way has been fun.
Last question. Like I said, you've been now to Stanford the last 3 weeks. You have residence there. I have to
Yeah.
ask my buddy, my colleague here at D1 Softball, Jenna Becerra. That's her turf. That's her place. Has she shown you around? Has she taken you to places? Have you hung out? Or has she what has Jenna been a good host? What do we what can you give us a report here?
Jenna's been great. She wasn't a lot of time to have like off time last weekend, so probably maybe this weekend we can have some more time to like chill and hang out a little bit. But last weekend is crazy. But Jenna was great. She gave me like her whole list of recommendations for food and where to go. So that was super helpful
Ooh,
because you don't have a lot of time after the game's over. It's like I need to know where I'm going, pick up some food. So
yeah,
Jenna was
yeah.
great. Yeah, so hanging out with Jenna at Stanford for 3 weeks in a row. Why
What's the
not?
big
Let's do it.
what was the big food recommendation she gave?
We went to Gott's twice, which is right across the street, and that was one of her recommendations. And it's like a really fun outdoor, very college vibe, like burger joint with milkshakes and fries, and it was really good. It was fun scenery as well.
Very good. All
Yeah.
right. I'm glad because I'm sure she had to return the favor because I'm sure you took care of her when she went to. Did she go to Arizona? I don't know if she went to Arizona. Whatever.
She was there for the Pac-12
She was.
tournament.
All right, so you took care
Yep.
of her back then, right?
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm look forward to seeing the two of you hang out some more this weekend. Should be fun. Stanford, LSU. Kenzie Fowler will be on the call with Mike Cousens. Should be a fun super regional. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're super swamped. You're doing your prep as we're talking for this super regional matchup. But keep up the great work. You know, we love you here at in the circle on D1 softball, and we'll be watching you. And maybe we'll get you back on during the postseason later on and see how it went. But good luck this weekend.
Yeah, talking to me after the season will probably be a completely different experience. I feel like my brain is mush right now, but we are excited. It's going to be electric matchup, Stanford LSU. You've got the seniors for LSU, Stanford's a young team, and they've got the best pitcher in the country. So let's go.